Beautiful Easter for those of you that celebrate it. Bob Rakowski out of Houston, Texas, with what is going to be an epic hour with Joshua Campbell. So just to give you a quick overview, what you're going to find out is what I think is one of the most inspirational stories in all of Organo. You're going to find out what's possible. And then Joshua is going to give some phenomenal tips on leadership. But Joshua, let's kind of just turn back the clock a little bit. Where are you right now at this moment in time?
Right now, at this moment in time, I am at home in Mississauga, Ontario, Dr. Bob.
But what about a decade ago? Where were you a decade ago?
A decade ago, I was in the warmth of Jamaica. So I grew up there, and it's absolutely lovely weather, really different economy, but that's where I was born and raised.
Okay, so I like origin stories. So let's just kind of go through the process. Tell me about your childhood, first and foremost. Tell me about the economy in Jamaica. Tell me about your upbringing.
Sure. So we grew up, and my mom became a single parent. So I'm the eldest of all my siblings, and there are three of them there now. And what happened was, as we're growing up, because the finances in Jamaica, one, are very different from Toronto. So the earning potential for an on-par job is just not the same. So the exchange rate's about 100 and something Jamaican dollars to $1 for pretty much the entire time that I was there, and a single parent income. So we never had a whole lot of choices. So we had those discussions very early on. And so in the summers, I used to work, I think from I was about 14 to maybe 17, and 4 weeks of summer, 4 months of summer work. And the most I'd ever earned was about 500 US. And at the time, that was like, oh my gosh, we have so much. I can go do this, I can go do that. But it had a finite limit. So go ahead.
Well, no, I love how you tell the story. So how many hours a week were you working?
It was definitely more than 40. On average, it would be about 50.
So you worked 50 hours a week, 4 weeks a month, right? That's going to be 200 hours a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then over 4 months, you made $500.
That's correct.
So if my math is right, they came out to like 62.5 cents an hour.
It would be roughly that, yeah. So it was at the time, and that was one of the better part-time jobs in Jamaica. And I absolutely loved it because it afforded a lot of other options, and buying food and going out and having fun with friends. But it was really when I said to my mom a little later on, when I was about 15 or 16, I said to her, I want to go away to university abroad. And she sat me down and she said, that's a big ask. I said, why? What do you mean? And she said, well, this is what financially that would look like. That's a really big ask. And so I said to her, okay. And she knows me, and she will tell you that I'm a little stubborn when I make a decision. So I went and I looked up all possibilities of trying to finance that. So what it looked like, scholarships for swimming, because I swam competitively. What it looked like if it was for grades, what did that have to look like? When it came down to us, she said to me, if you get the grades, I'll find a way. I said, done. That part I can do. Because it meant that, hey, I just had to do the grades, and I figured that was the easy part.
Well, I'm not sure that that's an easy part, but one, let's just kind of go back through this. So you grew up in a loving home, mm-hmm. but you learned responsibility early. You learned hard work early. You learned to appreciate money early. You learned to make a contract. If I do this, then you'll do that, right? With mom.
Yep.
So those are huge lessons early on. I'm sure they're a huge part of what shaped you to be what you are. And I certainly want people to get a lot out of this too. Now, how did mom help you with that? How was she able to meet her end of the game?
So it's really interesting that you asked that question, Dr. Bob, because I don't even think she at the time quite knew. But in Jamaica, we follow an English system for schooling. So we had 2 years after the equivalent of grade 11. And so the first set of grades came around, and I said to her, I got my part, so you got to do yours. And somebody handed her a sachet of coffee. She wasn't a coffee drinker at the time. and they handed her a sachet of tea. And I think she went to just humor the person so that he would stop asking her, but she brought me from swimming. So she picked me up from swimming and she says, you need to put on your school uniform. And we wore a tie in sixth form. So she says, you need to put it all on. And I, really, it's like 7 p.m. I want to go home. But put on the tie, went to the meeting, sat down, and that was the first introduction to organo. And I didn't understand anything about the benefits of Rishi or really that much about business. But what I did see was that it had a product that was a third of the price of coffee in Jamaica. And most of my friends, if you introduce them to a way to get something that they already had at a fraction of the cost, that tastes just as good, if not better, well, you're in pretty good shape. And so she had said, well, I've seen some of these things before. I don't want to do it. And I said to her, we've been looking for a way and nothing has really shown up on the doorstep. Can I take this and run with it? And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But what else is there? Because it definitely wasn't looking like it was possible. So we did it as a family unit and started with the bronze pack at the time. And I said to her, okay, can I get all the boxes? I'm going to go and retail them. And we're very, very fortunate that there's actually a warehouse that we had to pass every day to go to school. So if we needed products, we could order it the night before, go and pick it up. But those first 2 or 3 weeks, when I went to school and retailed everything by sachet, it was more than 500 US. That was what was made. And that was more than 4 months of summer work for me. So that was huge. And I came back home and gave her the cash and said, I need more coffee. And so she said to me, okay. And so she got me some more coffee. Then we struck another deal that I could only take 10% of anything that was made as a treat for myself later that year. But that was the beginnings in organo.
So just out of curiosity, about how many hours of effort do you think it took you to earn $500 selling coffee?
Not long. I went to every single person on that sixth form block, and there was no more than 150 students. And I said to them, hey, look, listen, I need you to try this. Let me know how it tastes, how it makes you feel, because that's what they had suggested us to do. And I said, it's $100 Jamaican for a cup. So it's $100 a cup, third of what you're currently paying. And I just went around. And what I found out later was I was known as a coffee guy on campus. Had no knowledge to that, but that was pretty cool. So in terms of time, that would have probably taken 3 hours every 2 days, because I went to the same students, and when they told me that they liked it, I said, great, who else do you think would like one too?
So let's say roughly 10 hours a week.
Roughly 10 hours a week.
So in 20 hours, you made $500, or in 50 hours a week for 4 months, for basically 800 hours, you made the same amount of money.
That's correct.
You must have thought you hit the jackpot.
I did. And that following Christmas, as a treat for myself and my brother, I remember taking the commissions from Organo, and just a portion of it was the portion that I was able to then treat myself to, and got our first PlayStation 3. And that was the absolute rave because we enjoyed it.
You know, so it's very, very fascinating. If we sell a cup of coffee here, I think we have the same idea. It's about, 1/2, or so of the cost of a Starbucks or a Tim Hortons or wherever they're getting it. It's going to taste as good or better. It's going to be way more convenient. And then if we have any inkling of the understanding of the health benefits, so did people notice a difference in terms of how they felt drinking this coffee?
They did. And they would come back and say and share their stories and their testimonials. And at the time, I was like, what are they talking about? Because people would come back and say, hey, I have more energy, that I could sleep better. Some people that had some aches and pains were saying that it's gone. Some people that had some really serious challenges, they were walking with walkers, didn't need the walkers anymore. And I said, I have no idea, but it's a third of the cost. It doesn't seem to be doing any harm. People are loving it. Let's continue. So I helped mommy track all the numbers on the back end. So it was after I started to see that, hey, this is pretty repeatable from a retail aspect. And as she started to build a business, I said, would it be possible to go away for school? Because it looks like something's changing here. And she said, yeah, I think so. And so definitely worked it, and then was able to move to Toronto for school.
All right. So tell me about that move. Where did you go to school and what was life like then?
Absolutely. So when I went to school, it was University of Toronto, and that was at the Mississauga campus, so right around the corner from where I am. And I thought that that was it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the dorm room experience. It's the first time I was ever introduced to snow, and learned the lesson quickly on how to buy snow clothes, and finally completed that lesson this year. But it was great. It was, hey, I was living on a dorm. I was creating a whole new identity for myself as to who I wanted to be, and did everything on my own. Well, because there was no parents at home to do it for you. It was, hey, if you don't do that, then you know it's not going to be done.
What did you study?
Studied chemistry and forensic science, so completed a double major there. Was able to work in a medicinal research chem lab. And so analytical chemistry and organic chemistry synthesis was definitely my jam. I loved it. And, but I think the biggest highlight there was when I graduated. I had a really different perception of the university experience than some of my friends, because when we were finished class, they were going to go work. And when I finished class, I wasn't. And what it came down to was because some of the financial challenges with going to university, a lot were taken care of. So Organo contributed significantly to my education, such that I graduated debt-free. And that didn't hit me until I finished, where people were talking and saying, hey, don't you have this and this to do? And I was like, nope, that's not my reality.
Well, one, for people that are watching this, and I definitely studied some organic chemistry, and I've got to tell you, it's a special kind of brain to really enjoy that. So congratulations on that, and then a double major as well as forensic science. All right, so now you've graduated. What's next?
So I graduated in 2016, and I then started working my first corporate job in downtown Toronto as a forensic consultant. And what that means is that we helped to identify and investigate the losses and provide some explanation and some guidance for the insurance world. That was in 2017. And I thought, oh my goodness, because again, the earning potential in Toronto versus Jamaica is very, very different. So I thought, hey, this is it, done. And I thought that life was going to be smooth sailing from there. The company was dealing with some stuff, and 6 months later, I got my first layoff. And I'm very grateful for it. And that's because when I got it, it really woke me up to the fact that one, nothing is guaranteed. And the only certainty that was going to be there is if I said, okay, is there anything that I can create for myself? I didn't know what that looked like, because during university, there's so many different things coming up. But I said, what could I start to create that I could have a little bit more control over, rather than showing up to work one day and getting a pink slip? And no fault, I'm not knocking that company, they're just going through some stuff. But I was like, that's interesting.
All right, so then the layoff, and how did you then meet your bills? What were you able to do to keep yourself afloat, basically?
So I had some savings as I started to investigate that, and I had a wholesale account because I absolutely love the latte and the mocha. So I was consuming that, and friends would come by and they would ask me, hey, what's that coffee? And I'd say, yeah, sure, go ahead, have one. But they wouldn't just take one. I would never forget that. They would go and they'll take one, and then they'll take 2 or 3 for later. And so I said, duh, like, you've seen this before, why wouldn't you not retail it? So started to do some retail, and that kept me afloat for a while. But there, in the business, it didn't really transition to a business account at that point. It was just some retail here, some retail there. And I was like, okay, what's next, as I started to evaluate? But one of the things that I noticed was that the things that I was saying to myself after the layoff were very different to the things that I was saying to myself in Jamaica. And the stark difference was that in Jamaica, there was a certainty that Organo was that answer. It was my vehicle to get out of Jamaica to wherever that was going to lead to, but that was the answer. in Toronto, all of a sudden that disappeared. And it was, would I be able to do this? I'm this old. It's very different here. I don't know anybody here. And that was really interesting because I don't know where that talk happened. And I think a lot of it was from associations in university. And the change happened so subtly, so slowly that I never recognized it happening, but it definitely did.
Well, so we can definitely talk about the law of association, right? So you're going to be the sum of who you hang out with. I went to school with some really great people, but let's just say the vast majority of them were not entrepreneurial. Now, if I went to a completely different culture, where everybody was certainly different than what I was used to, I might say, well, hey, I'm not from around here. And my gosh, I just graduated university. I'm pretty young. I don't have much experience. You know, why would anybody listen to me? So I think that's pretty natural if you're in a typical crowd. But somehow, some way you decided to go to an organo event in Tampa.
That is correct.
So one, what prompted that? And then two, tell me about the event.
So I'd known that my mom had gone to many organo events in the past and she had nothing but raving reviews to say. So here it was that I had time on my hands and I said, I want to go to that event. And so when I went to that event, I believe it was in 2016, so just before I graduated. And when I went to the event, it was person after person on stage sharing their story. They've achieved success irrespective of the conditions that were surrounding them. And I think it was Diane was on stage, I believe, at that event, and she shared her Sapphire speech. I remember sitting in the crowd and said, hey, that lady reminds me a lot of my mom. Very, very heart-centered, great energy. And I said, okay. So when I came back, I said, is this something that I could look into? And so I reached out and I said, are there any events in Toronto? Found out that Diane was hosting one. So I went and introduced myself to her, told her that I saw you on stage and that I was moved and I wanted to know if there are any events here that I could be a part of. And with open arms, she said, absolutely, you can come to all of them. This is when we're meeting, so and so on and so on.
All right. So, you know, I was at that event also. And, you know, one, I still to this day remember Diane's speech. It was very, very moving. But when we talked before, you said she reminded you of somebody. Who'd she remind you of?
She definitely reminded me of my mom, because when she shared her story that she was a single mom and that she was doing this for Dylan, who is absolutely amazing, I said, that reminds me of my mom, because I don't think my mom would have ever done the business had it not been for us, her kids. And I know a big part of her reason for doing it was to put us through university. And so I don't think that she would have ever done it if we weren't there. So that definitely resonated with me. And I said, okay, that's somebody I'd like to associate myself with. That's somebody I want to get to know. So
you found a way to be of service right away to all of Toronto. Tell me about that.
Absolutely. So growing up, mommy had taught us a principle that if you could do something nice for somebody that doesn't cost you with no agenda, you do it, end of story. So when I went to the meeting in Toronto, at the time it was a Bluetooth speaker, but it was plugged into a phone, and it was small but huge at the same time. It was playing some music just before the event to create the environment, to create that ambience and that atmosphere. And I said, yeah, I could do that, because I figured, well, doing that would give me a little extra association, and maybe I could catch a gem or two. Maybe I could ask another question or two. And so I started to do that. And I had since then become the AV guy in Toronto. So at the events, when you've come to, hooking up the Zoom, making sure that it's being shown properly and so on. So that's what I did. I said, okay, that's definitely something I can offer to the room, because I knew what could happen after there.
There are so many giants, which you will be, you know, you're well on that path, that's how they got their start. They found a way to be of service, and then somehow, some way, they were always part of the conversation as things went forward. I can tell you, I distinctly remember, maybe not the first time I went to Toronto, but because when they started the hotel meetings, immediately you were the guy, you were the go-to guy. What do you need? You need this for audio visual. And it wasn't just that, whatever was needed, you were doing it. So I want to share that lesson with the world. If someone's not exactly where they want to be, find a way to be of service, and the universe always brings it back. So, let's move forward now. So for a couple of years, you were there and you were of service, but your business wasn't yet really going where you wanted it to.
That's correct. So that was for about 2 years. I was really stuck in my head. And as my coach would say, is that if you're in your head, things are going to be tough. And what I learned was, as we're listening to some music, because I do teach spin classes, but one of the artists in Jamaica is Bob Marley. And he's credited with the saying, if you emancipate yourself from mental slavery, but only you can free your mind. And I said, okay. And I was listening to another set of tapes, and it had said, well, you can learn from your mistakes or you can learn from your mentors. And I figured, well, 2 years is enough time to learn from mistakes. Let's go seek some mentorship. So back in November, I went to Andrew Skopik for that mentorship. And that was a huge piece in terms of the mindset. How do you want to think? What anchor and emotion do you want to associate? And what do you want to create up here in between the airspace first, and then it comes out in reality? And at the time, that was Sapphire. So I said to Andrew in November, we had a conversation, and he said, do you have any timeline on that? And I said, February. Why February? It's because in the past, I know Organo typically had an event in February, and I was like, that'd be really cool to be walking across stage as a Sapphire. And so we set that intention. Again, I didn't know how that was going to happen because there was not much business activity there. And then that became a reality. So that was really, really fun.
I like rhymes and I like things that stick. So you were polite about how you said it. My mentors say, when you're in your head, you're dead, but in your heart, that's always a great start. And you can start fresh every single day. So tell me more about Andrew.
Absolutely.
How, I know a lot about Andrew, but I want to hear it from your perspective. So what drew you to him?
It was definitely, so I was not comfortable before speaking in groups. And when I first met Andrew, he was very comfortable speaking in groups, and not necessarily from a point of view of, oh, hey, look at me, I'm the guy, but he walked with a sense of confidence. And so I approached him and I said, you have that piece of confidence that I would like to develop for myself. And then he said, okay, well, tell me about it. So that prompted the conversation, but within that conversation was also, well, how do you want to feel? So we had made an analogy and an anchor is that when I was in Jamaica, I used to love watching poker because it was a game that just fascinated me, because there are 52 cards in a deck, and it doesn't matter the cards that you're dealt. A lot of the game of poker is played before the first card is turned over for everybody to see, because it's all up here. And so some of the greats will tell you, it's what's your attitude towards the hand of poker that is being played. And so from there, we chatted about it, and we really started to anchor down what attitude you'd be playing if you'd had the best of hands, and what attitude you'd be playing if you didn't have the best of hands, because nobody knows your cards until you tell them. And so that was a big piece for me, because I would walk around saying 7-2, I think, is statistically the worst hand in poker, but I'd walk around saying that I had pocket aces. And it was just done. And so that's really what started to happen up here, and then went out to do the work.
So then on your way, you did, the timeline worked. You became a Sapphire in February.
Yep.
But you also created a global growth bonus winner along the way. Now that's something I personally have not done. So how did that happen?
So that started with sampling a young lady by the name of Flordell at an event. And that event was a trade show, and followed up with her, and she loved the product. She loved the product, and she told me, I don't want to do the business. And I said, that's fine. You're enjoying the products, enjoy the products. She's a nurse, and so she found that from her 12-hour shift that she got so much more energy that she then wanted to share it with people. One of those people was a lady by the name of Maria. And she shared this coffee with Maria back in December. And Maria said, over December, she enjoyed her Christmas holidays and she ate very, very well. But she noticed that, one, she didn't put on any extra weight. And two, because she runs a few schools for personal support workers or PSWs, that she had way more energy. And she had expressed this to me at a mixer that we did for Flordell in January. That was the first weekend in January. And so at the end of this presentation, because I'd also asked Diane, what do I need to do to get this off the ground? And that was seeking that mentorship again. And she said to me, you need to host your own mixers. You need to be doing your own events. I said, got it, done. And Maria came up to me with a form in hand, handed me the form and said, let's do this. So we had a conversation and she expressed to me that she had a big network and not very much time. And I was the opposite. And I had a lot more time and I didn't have as large of a network. So every weekend from January to the end of February, we had events for Maria, some that she was there and some that she wasn't there because she went on a 14-day cruise or 7-day cruise in between. And she had put maybe each week, I think it was about 10 to 20 people that were trying the products or listening to the opportunity week after week. And I don't know that she was very close. I don't think she knew that she was very close. But your wonderful wife, and Mrs. Rakowski, sends me a message. Do you know that so-and-so is close for that global growth bonus? And I said, no, I didn't. So then I reached out to her and her only remarks were, what do I need to do to get it? And that was definitely a huge thank you to the support that you all offer, but then also she was extremely coachable and she just wanted to run. So in that run-in, Eric Worre trains on sponsoring 20 people in 30 days. And I said to myself, what would it look like if you could go 20 levels in depth with a single leg of business? That would be pretty cool. And I don't know if it ever been done before. I said, I don't know if it could be done in 30 days, but let's give it a try. Let's go do it. And that was the mentality that we went with. So I did every presentation for Maria. She invited everybody, but it was a real collaborative event. So from the presentations, entering forums, getting people products and so on.
You know, just in that exchange, you've said at least 5 things that I think are worth repeating and highlighting. And I wish I was taking physical notes. I'm going to watch the review again. But one, first and foremost, your mindset wasn't right. So you went to someone whose mindset you admired, and that would have been Andrew. Number 2, then when you got your head straight, you got in the game of sampling, and you did not know Flordell, from what I just heard you say. You didn't know Flordell first.
No.
Okay.
It was a complete stranger.
You gave her a sample and she liked the product. No pressure at all from you to join the business. Hey, if you like the product, that's awesome. But because you stayed connected, she felt better on a 12-hour shift. And God bless her as a nurse, right? 12 hours, so good that she's taking things for her body, mind, and spirit, especially what the whole medical world is dealing with right now. But then she liked it enough, not interested in the business, to obviously share with a friend, Maria.
That's correct.
And then Maria went through the holiday festivities. And I think in our conversation before, you said she would typically gain between 5 and 10 pounds on the Christmas holidays. That's never fun. But this time she ate and drank all she wanted and didn't gain any weight whatsoever. Then you realized that she had a good network but no time. Guess what? You had the time. Then you went back to mentorship with Diane. And Diane gave you strategies. You did the meetings. But not too long ago in this conversation, there was a time where you weren't comfortable talking in front of a room.
Yep.
But I never saw you in front of the room when you weren't comfortable. I've only seen you when you've owned the room. So I want to get back to that. I want to know how you own the room. But then here's where having, plugged in upline makes sense. Kelly's always watching, right? My wife, Kelly Rakowski's always watching. And she'll go, well, look at this person. Oh, look at that. They signed up 2 more. They signed up 2 more. Holy cow. I wonder if she's running for the global growth bonus. Guess what? She didn't know Maria, so she reached out to you. She probably didn't even know about it, but they were just following your lead, Diane's lead, Andrew's coaching. And by the whole way, Flordell is benefiting as well, right? So think about how many people that has helped in this process. And I promise you, people that are taking better health strategies right now, this is a really good time in our history to be healthy. But how did you suddenly own the room? Because you own the room.
So that's a very interesting question, Dr. Bob, is when Andrew and I had a conversation around how do you want to show up and how do you want to feel, it's at the time I was teaching spin classes, and teaching a spin class, you are in front of people. And I was really nervous because you're on a mic, there's a bright light above you. And I was like, man, if I make a mistake, it's going to be game over. But putting myself in some of those uncomfortable situations at the time taught me two big lessons. And that it's one, when you're at the front of a room, everybody is watching you. And that's always nice because you have their attention. But also two is, whether it was teaching a class or sharing about organo, it didn't have to be perfect because everybody in the room didn't know anything else. So if I made a mistake, and I know I did, a couple of times, they were like, oh, and we could always correct the mistake. I remember when we were in Ohio doing a presentation for one of Thordell and Maria's teammates, I was saying to them that I was doing a 7-day detox challenge with some of the organo products, and I had to go to the bathroom. Now they heard something completely different, and it was a huge laugh, but it was being okay with laughing at yourself through the process. Making a mistake or two, it's not the end of the world. Definitely learned that upon the spin bike. And at the end of the day, it was, which was I going to care about most? Was I going to care about maybe somebody chuckling? Or was I going to care more about the dreams and aspirations that I had? Is which one was I going to focus on? Because whichever one that I was going to focus on, that's what I was going to definitely get. And I just said, well, if I go up there and I fumble the whole thing, well, I'll know what not to do next time. And if I get up there and it goes well, how can I improve it next time? And that's the mentality that I went in with.
Huge tips. John Maxwell says, sometimes I win, sometimes I learn. And guess what? Sometimes when you learn, that just positions you better for the biggest win. But you said something that I want everybody watching to hear. The people that are in the audience don't know anywhere near as much as you do. And if you make a mistake, they don't really know that. So just flow with it, smile. You know, every once in a while, yeah, I've made plenty of mistakes in front of a room. And, you know, if it's a mistake that just misrepresents things, you know, misspeak, I'll correct that. But if it's just some other kind of faux pas, it's like, well, let's just laugh that one off and move forward. Beautiful tip. So this is interesting, though, because there were some backorder issues that were going on while you were becoming a Sapphire, while you were breaking a global growth bonus winner, while Andrew was becoming a Ruby, while Rod Norville was running and winning global growth. It doesn't seem that mattered to you. How in the world did you do this?
No, so the back orders were there, but we didn't focus on them. Andrew and Lima were absolutely fantastic at that they had some products and I would give them a call and say, I'm coming by to pick up some products. And they'll say, sure, great, what do you need? And I said, I'm not too sure yet. When I get there, I'll definitely know. But then I would go out and just get the products. I figured that if the product need was there, and I made that promise to Maria, I made that promise to Flordell, is that, listen, there's a little bit of a back order. If you tell me what you need, I'll go get it. End of story. And they said, where are you going to get it from? I said, good question, but I'll go get it. And they definitely did put that to the test a few times, but reached out to Rod and said, hey, can I come out to Oshawa to grab some products? Went and picked up the products and paid them cash. And because the products were moving, I know Diane talks a lot about energy, and it was true. It was an energy exchange. They were giving me products. I was giving them money or energy in the form of money. But that went through and that had a ripple effect because then the testimonials came back and people came back asking questions. They were feeling better. They were saying, hey, what's going on? I have way more energy. I'm not feeling as groggy in the day. And that was really, really fun to hear, to see, to experience.
So I want to highlight a few things. One, Diane Solano has created a phenomenal culture up there. Two, her right-hand person, I call her Shah Guru, Vanita Shah. She is the best wheeler and dealer in the game. I
Absolutely.
have never seen anybody organize and get product and make it happen. And there's a culture where everybody's together, doesn't matter cross line, doesn't matter anything like that. They all work together and there's just one goal: make the world better. Hey, and why don't we have fun while we're doing that?
Yeah.
So how beautiful is that?
It's
So
amazing.
now you had actually said that, your family's in Jamaica.
Correct. Yes.
But the relationship that you now have with your organo family, is that like a second family to you now?
Definitely is. There's so many people within the Organo Toronto community, and even with yourself and your wife in that international Organo community that have welcomed me with open arms. In Toronto, moving or migrating from one country to the next can be challenging. And especially when you go from 30-degree plus weather to Toronto can get a little cold. And I'm very grateful that I now learned how to buy snow clothes. But been over to the Charlton's homes for training and got to know their kids. We went across the border together and being at the hotel meetings, going and having conversations, going up and spending time with Andrew, going up and spending time with Rod. Uh, all of those experiences, all those memories, I don't know where else you can get that. You definitely don't get it in the corporate run from my experience. And so that was a beautiful piece, because I think a lot of the times some people look at Organo and they say, well, that's just another business opportunity. No, it's not. There's so much more there. And so I've said to people that are coming into the business, whether they're interested in the products or the business, this is another extension. This is a lifeline that you can reach out to if it is that you want to pick up the phone or send that text. And it's interesting to see the response. You get messages from people saying, hey, I'm going through this. Can we chat about it over a cup of coffee? Absolutely. And it just helps to build those relationships. Again, not looking for anything in return, but what you reap or what you sow is what you reap. And it's often that you reap it in magnitude to what was sown. And that's just been my experience. So I absolutely love the culture, the community in Toronto. I think when we travel to different locations, as we have in the past, that people can't tell who's on whose team. It's one contingent of Organo that's traveling, and that's lovely.
Well, I think it's, certainly the greatest culture that I personally have seen in the game. So I'm going to consider myself a very good student of the industry. And you're going to find all kinds of leaders. You're going to find leaders that are flash. You're going to find leaders that are, softer. You're going to find leaders that are, you know, let's just focus on the product, not necessarily the business, however that works. But one of the things that every leader is going to tell you is you've got to design the culture that you want, and then you're going to attract people into that culture. And one, it's a family culture, and then two, I'm going to say it's a servant leadership culture. And some people, the Navy SEALs actually, they quote that servant leadership is it's redundant. Every leader is a servant. But I don't know that I found that to be true, but it's certainly true in that group. But how did you learn about servant leadership?
So that goes way back to Jamaica. There's an instance back home, and I would have been less than 15 at this point in time, but there's a lady that was in the complex that we're playing outside and just playing soccer on the lawn, and I think we kicked over one of her plants. And she was very, very upset about that. And she definitely let us all know. 2 weeks later, at the grocery store, she was coming in behind us and opened the door and let her go in first. And that wasn't anything other than that's what I was taught. That's how I was brought up. It's if you can do something for somebody else that is the right thing to do and it costs you nothing, do it. So that lady, not to my knowledge, went and said to my mom, I can't believe that your son opened the door for me after I cussed him. And she then told me that story and said, Josh, people will always remember the things that you do and how it makes them feel. So that tied into coming up to Toronto and saying, well, I could do the AV and not asking for anything in return, but it's it's really interesting because we'll be in the hotel meetings and I'll notice that something is off on the Zoom and go up and correct it. If it is going to cause an interruption, then I'll let that be known. But that's really stuck with me and it's done so much for me. One of the stories that comes to mind is when I was in high school, I didn't always make the best decisions with some of my finances as I was learning those lessons. But there was one day that I didn't have any money for lunch. And the cook found out that I wasn't able to buy lunch that day and then gave me lunch for free. And I think that was because one day we had helped her load the car or unload the car of goods. And again, that would have probably been months before, not thinking about it at the time, never thinking that that was going to come back around, but it did. And things like that kept highlighting to me that what you really do put out always comes back to you. And it's sometimes it's somebody speaking well of you. So somebody going and saying, hey, have you ever heard of Josh? Yeah, absolutely. He smiles at me every time I see him. Or, hey, tell me about Josh, when they're going and asking references for all sorts of things. And I said, huh, that's a lesson that I've learned that served me very, very well.
What's most exciting to you now?
What's most exciting for me now is really anything is possible when you do make that committed decision. It probably will require some work, but it's definitely possible. I mean, I was talking with my mom earlier in the week because I thought about it, but never thought that it was possible until recently to have gone from some of the circumstances that were around to now be living completely independently in Toronto, to be building Organo part-time as I still currently do work. And I said, I don't know. And she said, but the world is anything that you want to make it. And just that's what's exciting to me, but even more so, showing people that it doesn't matter what your background is. I'm not saying, and I'm not downplaying what is currently happening or what people go through, but you can change it. You can change it if you want to. And so that's really exciting.
Well, Napoleon Hill certainly talked about the power of a truly committed decision. There's an author on leadership. His first name's John, and he was like a corporate person for Primerica. I can't think of his last name at the moment, but when he talked about the word decide, that side is like suicide, homicide, genocide. He said something's got to die. When you make a decision, something's got to die. And what should die is the part of you that doesn't support success in that venture, and just cut off all the options and then make it go. Now, you said something very, very interesting about men in the Caribbean. Do you remember our conversation on that? And how is your life different than that of a typical Caribbean man?
In my experience, what you see a lot in the Caribbean is that people are they portray a very masculine persona to them, in that they have to be the guy, they have to do it all without any help. And they take a lot of pride if they can get something done without asking for help. And growing up around in some of that environment, well, initially I was doing that. And I realized, hey, that's the easiest way to shoot yourself in the foot. It will hinder your success in almost everything. And so I said, well, okay, we've learned from those mistakes. Mentors have said, well, hey, if you want to go learn a skill, ask somebody that either can teach you or can point you in the direction as to where to go learn that. So I just said, forget this trying to do it all on yourself thing. It's not working. Definitely not at the pace that you'd like it to work. So if you're going to change, something has to change. Let's go ask. And that started with asking Andrew. That started with asking Diane, hey, what do I need to do to get this off the ground? And the questions kept coming from there. I know that I've definitely reached out to Diane on multiple occasions. Just did a presentation. This is what I was getting. Can we do a 3-way call? I don't know if you remember, but you sent me a video one morning just before I went to go present. And I said, man, who would have thought I'd have been getting a message from Dr. Bob? And it just brought so much joy to me. And then to ask you a question is, because I don't know how many books you've read, how many hours you've studied, but you have a ton of information that I'm so grateful that you dedicated to us, because I don't have that. And I find that you don't have to know everything. All you have to do is, one, is to know where to ask, but then be willing to ask and not think that it's going to make less of you because you've sought out that help.
I think that's written somewhere, something like ask and ye shall receive. Don't ask, you don't receive. You know, I want to kind of go back on that because, you know, I certainly, as a child, there was a little bit of macho in the culture where, hey, men had to do it all on their own. Then one day I learned from one of my mentors, you know, if you can accomplish your goals all on your own, your goals aren't very big. So, Josh, you haven't been on the planet very long, right? Less than half the time I've been here, but you've seen some major changes in the economy just in the time you've been here, and it looks like one's going on right now. So,
Yep.
tell me about your future of Organo in times where economic certainty of the world is uncertain. How do you feel about Organo's future?
I feel thrilled, excited, and full of optimism. And the reason for that is growing up in Jamaica, where your dollar is 100 to 1. So if it is that it's fun to go on vacation there because your dollars in Canada, the euro, or the US go a lot further. But when we used to travel, it would take almost everything to, one, go do the trip, but then buying stuff abroad, you're always looking for the deals because you wanted to make the dollar stretch. And so the economics of the world, I'm not a financial expert, but I understand and appreciate that things can be challenging. And I was born in 94, Dr. Bob. So when I saw, some of them I've experienced, some of them I've felt the impact of, but they hit to the economy where people lose their savings and they're wondering what they can do. In a very short time period, I went from having a conversation with mommy saying, hey, can I go away to university? And she looking at me and saying, that's a really, really big ask, to that changing to be, hey, it's looking possible. And then me going. So with Organo, it doesn't take a lot to start your business. In fact, back home, we got really good with pre-selling the contents of a pack before the pack ever arrived. And with that attitude and not looking at the resources that you necessarily have available, because I understand they may not be a lot. I was there. But the resourcefulness, which is inside of you, that's what we leaned on. And the resourcefulness with Organo, they've done all the shipping. They do the website design. They drop ship to the various countries. They have an entire team that does the graphics, does the design. And I thank them for it, because if you ask people, they will say, Josh can set up the Zoom, but don't ask him to design the flyer because it won't look very, very attractive. And it was, why not partner with a company that has done the work for you? Organo, I'm very, very grateful to them, is that I see them as a great option for attaining those dreams that you have. Because yes, the economy will go up and down. Life is about change, but that doesn't mean that your dreams have to go down when the economy does. You're allowed to dream. It doesn't cost anything, but it's then looking for what vehicle can fuel that. And from, yeah,
Keep going. You're on a roll.
and from my personal experience, it's, I don't know anything else that for the cost of starting, on the condition that you are going to do the work, that you can have what you want. And that to me is just really, really powerful, because I'll go do the work.
You know, this has been an absolutely beyond empowering conversation. You have done so much in a short time. You've grown more than many people ever will, no matter how much time they get on this planet. You found the power of mentorship. You found the power of leadership. You understand the power of partnering with the right type of company, the right type of organization, creating the right type of culture. And, you know, even Warren Buffett's going to say, coffee is recession proof, right? Our coffee, our tea. People are not going to stop wanting to look beautiful. We didn't talk about the BU. Once this ends, the world is going to be very hungry to travel. We've got Travala. Organo's got other things in the pipeline. What if you would wrap it up with just one message to the people out there? What would your message be? My
message would be is that don't, I know that circumstances may be difficult, and circumstances I'm sure will change for me as life continues to evolve. But finding that North Star, that center, at the time in Jamaica, it was going away and there were long days, long nights involved. There's a lot of work, but the reward is well worth it. Achieving that goal is well worth it. If it's, whether it's like you're doing an exercise class and you know that for these 2 minutes you're going to give 100%, you feel ecstatic at the end. You're like, oh my gosh, I did that. And the same thing in Organo is setting up that goal, saying, hey, I'm going to retail 2 boxes today. Doing that here and be like, hey, that's really cool. Could I do 4 tomorrow? Getting that new goal, whether it's a rank advance or sharing with people, that the reward so outweighs the work to get to it. And I think here we really have something special where other people coming back to you, sharing that good news with their hopes, and them being able to see, hey, you know, I didn't know if this could work for me, but I sold my silver pack, and I actually think that there's something here. And you see their eyes light up, and that's what I'm most excited about, is seeing people get their spark back for what is possible for them.
One of my mentors once said, it's good to have a job, but it's better to have a job that does good. It's good to have a business, but it's better to have a business that does good. When you look at the good that this business can do, whether we're making everything green, whether we're being organic and keeping our planet clean, whether we are providing sachets to women in Thailand to make beautiful purses for people that can enjoy them and serve their family on a higher level than ever before. You know, we've got this virus going on. No one's supposed to make any claims, but people in China that did traditional Chinese medicine, which would include Chinese herbs, which, by the way, Ganoderma is a Chinese herb, their probability of progressing from a mild to a severe case of this current pandemic was dramatically reduced. And when it was from severe to death, it was dramatically reduced. So we know that healthy strategies help in sometimes even the most dire circumstances. What we have is epic, and right now is the best time for all of us to follow this wisdom, become our best self, and make the world better in the process. Josh, this has been inspiring. I've enjoyed every one of our conversations. You have served everybody I know from day one that I met you, and I just want to plant that seed in the world that when you show up like that, the world is going to say, hey, what do you want? Let's go together. So I'm honored to be your friend. I love this conversation, and I like to just wrap up with my favorite close. I'm Dr. Bob Rakowski, absolutely knowing that we can all be happy, healthy, and successful. Happy, beautiful Easter. God bless all.
Take care. Take care. Thank you, Dr. Bob.